Welcome back to the Global Business Report here on Arise News. I'm going to talk technology now and the elections, upcoming elections. The Bimodal Voter Accreditation System, BVAS, and the INEC Results Viewing Portal, IREV, have drawn concerns from different sectors of the political space, claiming that Nigeria may not be ready for the deployment of such technology. Now, the electoral umpire has insisted, as INEC, that the use of technology could not be reversed at the time. There have been some concerns surfacing that a number of affected voters could be impacted, of course, by the tech if it's not working properly. So we're going to have a discussion with the head of research at SBM Intelligence, Ikemesit Effiong, about the BVAS and whether or not those concerns are valid and what kind of election we could have if it's working effectively or if it's hampered. Ikemesit, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So how is BVAS supposed to work?
Yeah, so how BIVAS is supposed to work is that the barcode, which is at the back of your permanent voter's card, right, is scanned onto the BIVAS device, or in the case of, just to act as redundancies, right, the last 6 digits of your voter identity number can be entered into the device, or you could have a situation where the last name, right, of the voter is also entered into the device, and it serves as a mode of accrediting and basically confirming that you are eligible to vote in a particular polling unit. So in a nutshell, that's how it's supposed to work.
All right. So are there legitimate concerns about the effectiveness of the BVAS technology?
Well, the primary concerns center around technology, right? So BVAS, by its nature, right, is a scanning device. It requires an internet connection. The various BVAS iterations that we've seen in the off-cycle elections that have occurred so far, right, do require regular software updates, right? And so because of that, right, a strong internet connection, ideally a 4G internet connection, right, is required. And the primary concern is that, 4G is not widely available across all of Nigeria. And we've seen this play out, right, in some off-cycle elections. And the real concern is that with the paucity of 4G as well as 3G coverage nationally, most BVASs might not work seamlessly come election day. Now, BVAS has an offline authentication fail-safe where because BVAS devices are paired to particular polling units, right? So authentication can happen locally, and then confirmations can then be uploaded when the BVAS is either stitched up to an internet connection afterwards, or the connectivity in a particular area improves. But as we saw in some of the recent off-cycle elections, even that fail-safe is not 100% foolproof. So that's a primary concern that sort of has circled around.
Oh, okay, all right. So can you define, maybe this is addition to what you just said, BVAS black spots and how they could impact? Is that like a blind spot when you're driving between your rearview mirror and your own line of sight? What is a BVAS black spot?
Well, that basically just refers to, areas where network coverage does not seamlessly support, right, the use of these devices. And if you've ever gone on a cross-country trip, right, or even an interstate trip, right, across this country, that there are certain areas where the connectivity isn't very good, right? And so the primary concern is that for polling units and in some cases, entire wards, right, that essentially exist in these areas of patchy, right, internet connections, right, you could have a situation where the accreditation process, right, is extended in Anambra, for example, I think in 2021, and in pockets of Osun, right, this year you had a situation where certain voting had to be extended in certain polling units just because that BVAS accreditation process, right, didn't work in polling units that were in some of these black spots, right? And so the concern is if you have enough of them in enough wards, in enough states right across the country, then it might undermine trust in the election management process.
Okay, so I think you already answered this next question, because I was going to ask you if 2G is enough and whether or not everyone had to be at least on 3G. But I think earlier I heard you say 4G. So what's the acceptable threshold here for internet connectivity for BVAS to work effectively and get past these black spots?
Okay, so the generally accepted rule of thumb is that 4G is the most ideal connection strength, right, for BVAS to work seamlessly. It does work on some 3G connections, but not all 3G connections are created equally, right? So in some areas that have 3G coverage, and 3G generally reaches about 83%, right, of Nigeria's geographic landmass, right? But again, just because of the strength and the quality of 3G and how that variability means that, in some places, BVAS might work fine, and in some other places it might not work fine. 3G is generally seen as acceptable, but then not all 3G is created equally. And once you go below 3G, then you're really pushing at the threshold of BVAS efficiency, right? And the concern is, right, that there are, a number of polling units. We are in the middle of crunching the numbers right now, so we don't actually have a definitive number for how many wards or how many polling units that is. But it appears to be, it appears to be significant enough that you can't ignore that. So INEC has to find a way to provision for how it's going to manage the accreditation process in those polling units.
All right, so the NCC, the regulator, is in the middle of another round of auctions for 5G spectrum. I want to ask you if we can walk and chew gum at the same time, because you've got MTN Nigeria, you've got Mafab, you've got these companies that already have got that first spectrum rolling out 5G. Does that negate is that negated, by the 2G, 3G argument you just had, where Nigeria is already, getting ready to deploy 5G in certain areas of the country, and yet you've got other areas that barely have 2G or 3G, which could impact BVAS. So can both coexist?
I mean, we're seeing with 2G and 3G and 4G that, certainly there's a level of coexistence within the ecosystem in terms of the strength and the quality of internet connectivity. So the short answer to the latter part of your query is yes. Coexistence is very much baked into the system. The thing though with internet connectivity is that for a lot of the operators, they are really just following consumer demand, right? So even though we've had 4G for I think 6-7 years right now, we're pushing on a decade, right? Of 4G, we've certainly had 3G for more than 15 years in Nigeria. Depending on the network provider, I think for the network provider that provides the most 4G coverage, that figure stands at about 43%, right? In terms of internet penetration, the NCC has an internet broadband penetration target of 70% by 2025. By all indications, some of the network operators might hit that figure by then, but the economics has to support, right, 4G and by extension 5G rollouts. No operator is going to roll out 4G, let alone 5G, in a place where the economics doesn't support it, right? And the real concern is that if you have a situation where the entire country hasn't transitioned out of 2G, let alone 3G, into 4G, right, as of November 2022, then with 5G, you would have a situation where a few niche markets, right, would enjoy the best quality, right, in terms of internet, speeds and connectivity and coverage, while much of the rest of the country is laboring under slow internet connections.
Very interesting stuff. And look, it's fascinating stuff. We hope we have a seamless election. Technology is very, very important. We appreciate you joining us. Ikemesit Effiong, Head of Research at SBM Intelligence. Thank you so much for your time.